Hello. Hi, everyone. I was like, I'm about to do it live. I am live. I am having a conversation with Father Boyle from Homeboy Industries. He'll be coming on in a bit. I turned off the comments because we're talking about mass deportations, talking about humanity, talking about a lot of stuff today. And we don't want anything hateful here. We want people to listen to Father Boyle's message. So I will be turning off the comments and there it is. Hi, Father
Hi, Eva.
Boyle.
How you doing?
I we could be better.
Yeah.
How are you?
Is it late there?
Yeah, I'm in France. I'm working and it's almost midnight. Well, it's like 11. It's 11.
Yeah,
Uh I just thought it was important for us to have this conversation. I'm so grateful that you were able to make time today so we
sure.
could have some conversations. I was just saying I turned off comments for this talk because I really want this to be a place of love and igniting some faith into the conversation instead of these algorithms of hate. And so I thought, let's turn off the comments and have a nice conversation, you and I, about what's happening in our community.
Yeah. Well, uh,
I and I also feel like on the eve of this big protest tomorrow, I mean, I have anxiety as a lot of people do, and I felt like it was important to, have this conversation, use my platform, my time, my energy, your time, your energy. Um, you're somebody who I've deeply admired for so long, worked with in the past. You're a man of faith who really leads by example. And I'm so grateful for your leadership in a moment like this. And I think, there's there's a goal of this conversation. I just wanted to set up for some people of like it's both to speak directly to our community that's going through this and let them know that they're valued and loved, but also to I guess to those who are devaluing us or dehumanizing us and wanting to have more of a spiritual conversation about that as well. But I just want to ask you first, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What are you seeing in LA? I feel so far, and so I wanted to hear straight from you what you're seeing that you think the rest of the country may not be seeing.
yeah, so the focus is, I guess, on outside and the press is, the supposed chaos, and that's certainly not our experience in terms of the protests. But what we are experiencing, and which is creating a great deal of anxiety and fear in the community, and it's pervasive, are
Yeah.
these raids that continue, and I've never seen it, not since maybe the mid 80s or something when we had something like this, but this is
Yeah.
we've never seen this. So like for example, we have St. John's Medical Group that comes here every Friday in a big van, mobile thing, and they didn't come today because yesterday they were in Downey and people came to get medical attention from this mobile unit, and they it was a raid. They just round all these people up. It was just extraordinary. And then I had another guy in my office right now who talked about how in also in Downey, so it was near there, they had people were how people in puestos selling fruta and
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
corners, and people were coming and they came and swept those folks up. Now, presumably, it was probably a mixed bag of, undocumented and not, but they were all brown, so it's really staggering. And there are endless examples of that kind of thing that's happening.
Yeah.
So that's the real chaos. The chaos is being, perpetrated and manufactured by, those policies that want to
Yeah.
and are insistent on mass deportations and meeting a
Yeah.
quota.
Yeah. Well, and also, you know, I've spoken out a couple of times, and sometimes a lot of the comments is like, just do it legally, just be legal, just do it the right way. And what is now terrifying is the kind of this, they're trying to take away the legal status, right? They're threatening to take away people who are have documentation, who have green cards. They're taking away student visas. They're, you know, taking away, just attacking the legal status if you even have it. I mean, there. So it's not just rounding up, you know, people who are undocumented. There are a lot of people getting caught up in these raids, and I just wanted to ask you, as a man of faith as well, like, what does this say about us as a society when we're pulling babies out of mothers' arms, when we're pulling kids out of school and putting handcuffs on a 10-year-old, when we're, you know, attacking a medical van? I mean, what does this say about us? And I mean, it seems to me like the church and the Bible are very clear about how we should treat immigrants. So how do we appeal to, I guess, people of faith who may not be on our side?
Yeah, I mean, this is an endeavor that is not aligned with the energies of God. So once you know the God of love, you know that mass deportation fits nowhere in God's view.
Mhm.
So the big tell is, you know, demonizing is the opposite of how God sees. And so, like here at Homeboy Industries, this is part of the air we breathe. You know, we stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop,
Mhm.
and we stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. That's the energy of God's spirit and heart. So, demonizing is the opposite of God, and mass deportation could not be manufactured to fit into some kind of notion of any God of love.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to kind of underscore that families are sacred, work is sacred. The search and the longing to feed your family and to educate your kids and put a roof over their head, this is holy, this is sacred. These are things that you have to honor. Otherwise, we lose our soul in this endeavor that wants to separate children from their parents,
Mhm.
and again, these are people who are fleeing danger, and they're fleeing poverty.
Mhm.
And so, but they're the natural ways that people would, like, even all these folks who go to the federal building because they're obliged to report and kind of a status update, and then judges, you know, tell them this, dismiss this or that, and then there's, you know, border patrol outside the courtroom ready to arrest them and then deport them.
Yeah.
So people are trying to play by the rules, but it doesn't matter in a time when due process and the law. This is real lawlessness, and
Yeah.
and and again, it's, you couldn't make the case that this is a sign of health that we're rounding people up. You
Yeah.
know, that
Yeah.
this is not what wholeness or wellness looks like. And
Well, and I agree. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
you know,
you. No, no, I agree. And look, I think what I've learned, you know, I've been advocating for farm workers for 25 years, and uh, I've been an advocate of immigrant rights, and for so long. And what has been obvious is that we Chicanos, Latinos, Mexicanos, Mexicano Americanos, we have a longstanding tradition of standing for what's right, and whether that's through civil disobedience or marches or protests or the farm worker movement in the 60s and the civil rights movement in the 60s and the East LA walkouts in the 60s. What feels different this time? I mean, I obviously didn't live that time in the 60s, but I would imagine it was equally scary to stand up for what's right. And so we have our entire community going out tomorrow and what is different this time than, you know, I guess historically when we have stood up for what we need as a community and to protect our own.
well, I think we're just Vivek Murthy, who's was the Surgeon General, he says that mental health is the defining health issue of our time. This is really about health. It's about people who aren't well, who are, President of the United States and insisting on quotas to round up more and more immigrants. These people aren't healthy. They aren't well. And, I don't really think in terms of evil or bad. I'm thinking, no, nobody healthy would advocate for mass deportations. Nobody healthy does that. So how do we walk each other home to
Yeah.
health and to wholeness? And, how is it different from times past? I still
Hmm.
think, it's not enough to just point things out. We have to point the way. And people are, I think tomorrow at the march, when we're marching together, and then I've marched in the same group that has organized these, and they're kind of joyful and they're
Peaceful.
uniting and
Peaceful.
peaceful. Of course,
Yeah.
they're peaceful, but they're also, they tap into our communal uh, longing to have and create community such that God might recognize it, to create places of belonging and where people feel mutually and exquisitely cherished in community. This is the prevailing mode of health and wellness that people, by and large, embrace. But
Yeah.
we need to stand against, the impulse that's not healthy or whole, that wants to divide families, round up people, disregard the rule of law, and embrace a lawlessness that's really demeaning and it does not in any way advance the sense of community and belonging that we all long for. And I so I'm more hopeful about the march tomorrow, and
Yeah.
about our ability as a country to embrace what is whole and good and true and just,
Hmm.
which is the path of somebody who's healthy and whole,
Yeah.
and that we can stand against the current regime that is really quite autocratic, and
Hmm.
I've never seen this in my 71 years of living ever in
Yeah.
our country. Who would have thought that you could use this verb, disappeared, that we've had people
Yeah.
disappeared from our country? I would have thought that unthinkable, that I would utter that sentence in the United States of America.
Hmm.
But we can utter that sentence. We can use that verb. People are being disappeared from our country to a gulag in El Salvador or God knows where else.
Yeah,
And
we
most
don't
people,
know.
we
Well,
don't
especially
know.
with the children. I mean,
Yeah.
when you have a 10-year-old appearing in court by himself because his parents have been deported and now he doesn't know where they are and they don't know where he is. It's mind-boggling to me, the inhumanity of the process. It's not only, I'm not shocked they're doing it, I'm shocked at how they are doing it, the violentness, this 9-month pregnant woman being thrown to the ground, a newborn baby being ripped apart. Where's that baby going? Where's she going? There's no accountability. Nobody, Senator Alex Padilla, if a senator is asking questions and trying to get answers and is treated that way, imagine what our farm workers are going through. Imagine what, other immigrants, how they're being treated and how they're being rounded up, right?
And imagine farmers right now, in Ventura and Central California, where there are raids and vegetables and fruits just rot on the vines because people aren't coming to work,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like people don't have a sense of the impact that our immigrant community contributes to the productivity of
Economy.
our country. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And our economy. But and I do agree with that because we are very blind to the fact that we have industries completely dependent on immigrant labor. But at the same time, I understand the argument that immigrants' value is not just in their workload. These are human beings. These are mothers, fathers, sisters, and so yes, they do contribute enormously to not only our economy but our social security that they don't get to draw from. They, they do pay taxes. They pay into a system they'll never be able to gain from. But at
But
the end of the day,
even
you know,
2/3 of those who've been rounded up in Los Angeles have no criminal record at all. But even the other third, who are folks, I'm going to presume because I've worked at Homeboy Industries for nearly 40 years, I presume that the other third are people who have moved past, a criminal, uh, past, and that somehow managed to find their way to reimagining their lives, after having made mistakes early. And all of them are a whole lot more than the worst things they've ever done. And so all of them, as you say correctly, are all human beings. They all belong to us.
yeah,
And the difficulty comes if we start to believe that there are folks who actually don't belong to us. Then there's a total disregard for how we treat them, and it won't matter whether we separate a mother from her newborn, and it won't matter whether we, uh, you know, uh, tackle
yeah,
a senator in a press conference who has clearly identified himself as a senator,
yeah,
and yet, and then we have to deal with people saying, the secretary of HHS saying, he lunged at her. I mean, it's just
yeah,
preposterous.
yeah. And there's cameras.
And there are
There's-
cameras and there's recordings, and so we all see it,
yeah.
and they're
Well,
asking us to believe our lying eyes, I guess.
I know. It is, um, I, I have many words. But I get my question to you is like, what conversations are you having with people who may not always, may not have always been allies, right? Like, and especially I think, people, how do you have a conversation with people who don't agree with your work? And you've done so many books about this, and for me the through line for all of your books is that God calls us to love everyone. And you've done that by example with Homeboy Industries and with the community that you work with. But because the problem that we're having right now is changing hearts and minds. And so you seem to have been effective at this, having a conversation with somebody that may not agree with the work that you do.
Yeah, I think that at some point you kind of abandon the desire to win the argument, because that doesn't really fly most of the time. But like here at Homeboy, there are two overwhelming principles that we embrace. One is that everybody's unshakably good and no exceptions, and that we belong to each other, no exceptions. And if you embrace those two things, it's what enables you to roll up your sleeves, to point the way, to say, we could actually live in such a way that we care for each other, and that we can declare, especially at the moment, to our immigrant brothers and sisters and those who are undocumented, that we will never abandon you. We
Mm,
just won't ever abandon you.
mm,
So we kind of walk with people, and then it becomes, you're starting to live as though the truth were true, and your whole being is somehow putting first things recognizably first.
mhm,
And so it's not about winning people over, or uh, winning the argument, because then you're not arguing, you're just showing what it looks like, for people to embrace those two principles, that we're all good and we belong to each other.
mhm,
And then when people see that, that's kind of how Homeboy operates. It wants to be the front porch of the house everybody wants to live in, because it,
mhm,
it points, what if we were to care for each other? What if we were to declare that we will never abandon people who are outside? What if we were to imagine a circle of compassion, and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle? Nobody. And then
yeah,
that would propel us, I think, to dismantle the barriers that exclude, which is the point of this march tomorrow, which I encourage everybody to join in wherever they are in the country, because it's a way of people truly voting with their feet, and declaring with their bodies that we won't abandon anybody who's demonized or seen as disposable, and that we will stand with the easily despised and the readily left out, and that we're going to stand in the right place. You know, the Beatitudes, it says, blessed are, but the original language is you're in the right place if you're working for justice, if you're a peacemaker, you're in the right place if you're single-hearted. So it's not so much a spirituality, it's a geography. It's telling us where to stand. And tomorrow's a good example, you know. People can stand together. And I think in that community, people will
Yeah.
find a kind of flourishing and an ability. You know, that's the fear is contagious for sure, but so is the courage, and so is the kinship. That's
Yeah.
as contagious as anything.
Yeah. Well, and I said this on another video about compassion and how we're really lacking it. Even as a community, you know, there's this demand for everybody needs to speak out and everybody needs to say something. And then sometimes people speak out and then they're criticized for doing it wrong or saying it wrong. And I think we're missing the intention, right? Like there's people who want to link arms with us. Let them be allies, you know, and not everybody can march, not everybody can protest. There's no perfect advocate, right? Like if you're an ally, you're welcome. Please join us in standing for what is right. And I feel like we have to have more compassion and grace because everybody can only show up in the way that they can. You know, not and everybody, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something.
Something
And so I
exactly
feel
right.
like not everybody can protest, not everybody can donate money, not everybody can march. You know, if you showing up is convincing your uncle to change his mind, right? If your way of showing up is calling your congressperson, if your way of showing up is posting on social media, thank you. Thank you. You know, do what you can. And I think there's a lot of ways that you can show up, and we need them all. We need all of these ways. Um, and each of these ways are valid. And so I encourage our own community to, you know, have compassion and grace for those who feel like they're in danger of speaking up, or they may not be able to march. They may not be able to leave their house, you know?
But you know, you started by asking about faith, and I think every faith, no matter what, you know, it is kind of anchored in the things that matter, like inclusion and nonviolence and unconditional loving kindness
Hmm.
and compassionate acceptance. And this is the anchor of all faiths. You know, even if you don't believe in God, you can connect to those things that matter. And so that's where we need to kind of find our compass
Hmm.
and our health and our holiness in those kinds of endeavors. And what keeps us from demonizing, which is the kind of the heartbeat of what's happening from Washington D.C. and the horror of the silence of so many people, elected officials who are just silent in the face of lawlessness and an
Yeah.
abandonment of the due process of law, is that once they connect to, you know, the God of love, then they'll fire all the other gods, you know, the ones that make it okay to dismiss people and to not care about babies being snatched from their mothers.
Yeah.
And 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 then it puts you in a place where you have integrity as a person of faith. It's hard to do it otherwise, you know, because God doesn't demonize ever, period, the end, ever. And but if you believe in a God that does, then I think it's time to, you know, to reevaluate, uh, you know, what you think or believe or what image of God. You know, it's true that that we're created in God's image, but it's also true that our image of God creates us, and so we're in a place where we're if your
Yeah.
God is petty and mean and exacting and judgmental, and if your God separates, you know, people from each other,
Yeah.
then you will be inclined to do the very same thing. And so there's nothing more consequential, it seems to me, than to refine a notion of God so that it's the most spacious and expansive version of God, so that we can be that in the world. And that's all we're called to do, is to be in the world who God is: compassionate, loving, and kind.
Yeah. And there's so much. I mean, I feel like for people who claim to be Christians, there's so much in the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, and all it's in there. It's all in there about how we should treat immigrants and how we should love our neighbors and how we, need to lead with love. Why do you think, we struggle as a nation to, or we struggle as a nation full of people of faith to have that compassion?
Yeah, well, I think a healthy person is loving and compassionate and merciful, and people who aren't so healthy aren't. And
Hmm.
so it's a question of, the moral quest has never kept us moral. It's just kept us from each other. So how do we get to a place where it's about walking each other home to health? If people are unshakably good and if everybody belongs, then it just means some people aren't well enough to kind of see the large picture, that immigrants are human beings and no human being is illegal, and you can't justify that by reading the Bible and saying, yes, God would like us to engage in mass deportations. That's impossible. You can't get there. We had
Yeah.
an interfaith rally here downtown,
Hmm.
and out in the crowd was a young man, and he had a Bible, a huge Bible, and written on the Bible it said, "Love your immigrant neighbor," and and it was so moving because he was so young, and yet he kind of got it,
Yeah.
that love never fails, and that we want to discover our true selves in loving. And once you know that loving is your home, you're never homesick. And that's what a healthy person looks like.
Yeah.
And and truthfully, people can look at somebody setting a Waymo on fire in downtown LA, which is not that different than a Laker championship, where there's
Yeah.
somewhat chaotic, but it's nobody's out of control, and
Yeah.
nobody healthy would ever send National Guard
And
to
Marines.
Los Angeles against the will of the governor and the
Yeah.
mayor. But
Yeah.
but the assessment is, it's not a moral judgment. It's a health assessment. Nobody healthy does that. How can we protest in a way that's nonviolent, but in a way that's healthy, that calls people to something larger, you know. And we're all being invited to be a light that people can see
Hmm.
by, and we help each other do that
Yeah.
in in mercy and grace and compassion,
Yeah.
but confidence
Hmm.
that love really never fails. And if it feels like it's failed before, it's only because we've never fully tried it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's why I wanted to have this conversation, is because I want to flood our timelines with love and compassion, not the hate, not this divisiveness, not, we have to have a conversation about, you know, a healthy
Yeah.
mindset, and trying to, again, for me, change hearts and minds,
Yeah. So
so
when
that,
we when people talk about flooding the zone, with horrible things, well, like, then we just changed the narrative. How do we attach ourselves to a larger narrative, to a larger love? And in the end, because we're all human beings, we will connect. People will connect to our loving speech, to our loving action.
hmm.
People will understand, folks who are pointing beyond themselves to the God who loves us without measure and without regret. People will see it. People will understand it. We just need to be confident in it.
Yeah.
It's not about throttling somebody and saying, see it my way. it's it's the same compelling message that's been around for a long time, that love is greater than anything else, and that if that's, once you find your true self in that, and you find your anchor in it, then it's, you can't dispute it. People will look at it and they'll understand it and they'll nod in agreement,
Mm-hmm.
and they will affirm what your life is saying, that we all matter, we won't leave anyone out, and at this time when the immigrant community is so under siege, we will not abandon them, period. We won't ever do it.
Period. I'm so grateful for all the work that you've done throughout the years. Thank you so much for everything that you do with Homeboy Industries and just being a guide for me as well. You've been really an example of what we all should be.
the, the feeling is so mutual. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to tag Homeboy Industries on the conversation, and if anybody wants more resources, I know on my social page everywhere, there's a lot of orgs that I've tagged, I've mentioned. If you want to donate, if you want to volunteer, if you, however you want to be our ally, all the information is there. So thank you, Father Boyle, for this conversation.
Thank
I
you.
send you lots of love and light.
Ándale, pues, be well.
God bless you.